In this exercise, we're going to be creating a Photoshop collage just to practice using some basic selection tools and layer masks. So I went ahead and typed in Photoshop collage into Google Images just to give you an idea of the types of things you can do. Definitely check out, some inspiration on different inspiration sites like Pinterest or designspiration.net to get a sense of all the different types of Photoshop collages you can make. I like the really kind of weird ones like this. Okay, so there's a lot of different elements that are mixed here. Some that are photographic, some that are more textural, like there's kind of a paper texture in the background. And there's also a few things that, look like they're pulled from flat photographs or newspapers or some other kind of print media. Okay, so there's a lot of fun things you can do. You can also find images from places like Unsplash or Pexels. All these images are high quality and they're completely free to use. So, here's the donut that I'm working with. You can go down here and just find a ton of great photographs that you can make use of. So definitely check that out for inspiration. Okay, let's go back to Photoshop. And you can see I've pulled 3 photographs in here. For this assignment, you're required to use at least 6 photographs. So I don't quite have enough, but I'm just going to get started on a little bit of a collage to give you guys an idea. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new document because we're going to be want to be working on 11 by 17 in this assignment. So I'm going to select Art and Illustration for my preset, change our unit of measurement to inches, and then go with 17 for the width and 11 for the height. I'm going to change my resolution to 72. There we go. And I'm using white for my background layer. You could use transparent if you want to, but white is going to work just fine, so I'm going to stick with that. Okay, so here's my document. And what I can do is start to pull in different portions of these images. Okay, so if I go ahead and select this background layer, I can hit Command-C to copy it. And actually, I'm going to have to unlock it first. So let's go ahead and unlock that. Hit Command-C to copy it. Let's go back to our original document here and hit Command-V. That's going to paste in that image. Okay, so one thing you'll notice is that this image is really large. So I'm actually just seeing a small portion of the ocean. That's because this is a really high resolution photo and it's pasting it in at 100%. Okay, so if I want to shrink this down, I'm going to have to select that layer. If I hit Command-T, okay, and if I zoom out a little bit, you'll see how big that image really is. Okay, so I'm having to zoom out quite far, and I can shrink that down and get the size that I want. Okay, I can also drag it around anywhere that I want. Okay, so let's just look at that part of the image. There we go. Okay. All right, now let's go ahead and go back to our donut. Let's make a quick selection out of this. And since this is a collage, you can either work with, more precise selections or more rough selections. If you want to keep parts of the background, that's totally fine. This is not about creating really precise selections, so up to you how you want to work. In this case, I'm going to work with the quick select tool. I'm just going to really quickly come around and make a pretty quick selection of the donut. And I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and deselect that middle portion. And it grabbed too much, so I'm just going to go ahead and kind of build that back in. There we go. Again, I'm going to unselect or unlock that layer and then hit Control-C and paste that into my document here. And again, you can see it's really big. Okay, so I could hit Command-T and sort of shrink this down. But a better way to do this is to actually work with a layer mask because, this is going to do the trick, right? But if I look at that layer, I've, kind of ditched all the information outside of the donut. So that could be problematic if I wanted to go back and include more of the donut itself. So let's go ahead and delete this new layer. Okay, and then let's go back to that donut file. And instead of, just copying the selected part, let's go ahead and create a layer mask. Okay, so in the layers panel, once again, I'm going to go down here, create that layer mask. Okay, and then I'm just going to select the entire layer here, hit Command-C, and then I'll go back and hit Command-V to paste that in. Okay, so this is a little bit better. We have the same issue where it's really large, so let's go ahead and shrink it down. Okay, but this is a little bit better because now we've retained all the information from that donut layer. Okay, so if for some reason I wanted to bring back some of that blue from the background, before I was using the layer mask, I wouldn't be able to do that, but now that I'm using the layer mask, I can go ahead and select the mask itself, and then I can just sort of brush that away. Okay, so if I select a white brush, let's go ahead and choose a harder brush. It's a little bit smaller. Okay, I can like paint that blue layer back in if for some reason I wanted that. Okay, in this case I don't, so I'm just going to kind of leave that out, but that is a good option to have, and it's only available if you're using layer masks. Okay, so now I have kind of this donut. Let's make that a little bigger. Okay, there we go. And then let's go ahead and go back to our newspaper. Okay, and then for this one, let's just take a little piece of this. Okay, so I'm going to use the polygonal lasso tool and just kind of create like this little cutout thing. Okay, and then I'm going to use a layer mask to mask that off. Then once again, I'm going to select the entire layer, hit Command C to copy it, and then let's paste it into our thing here. Okay, there we go. And we can go ahead and shrink this down as well. Okay, so I've got some different objects in here. One problem that you might be running into, and this can be a little bit of a non-intuitive thing in Photoshop, is the way that selecting objects works. Okay, so right now I have what's called auto select turned on, and so if I click on this donut, okay, you can see that it selects the donut in this layers panel. And same thing, if I want to go back to the newspaper and I click on it, it's going to select that layer in the layers panel. Okay, so this works really similar to how Illustrator works, and it's a bit more intuitive. But if you have auto select turned off, you're going to run into this issue where it's not going to automatically select the donut when you click on it. So right now I have the newspaper selected, and if I click and drag on this donut, I'm going to expect the donut to move, but instead it's just going to move the newspaper. That's because I have that layer selected in the layers panel without auto select on. Okay, it's just going to move the layer that I have selected. So it's not going to select the donut just because I'm clicking on it. So you can always toggle auto select on and off by holding down Command. Okay, so if I hold down Command, it turns auto select on. I can click on the donut and then I can move that around. And then I can click Command again to select the newspaper and then move that around. So up to you whether you want to keep this on by default or whether you want to keep it off by default and use Command to toggle it. But just know that if that is not turned on, it's not going to work in the same way that Illustrator works, where you can just really easily select things and move them around. It's always going to fight you a little bit, so you just kind of have to be aware that that is the case. All right, so we've got some different elements here. Let's also play around with some blending. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and let's go ahead and turn this newspaper mode. Okay, so when I have this layer selected, we have this drop down that says normal, and this is the same as the blending modes that we were using in Illustrator. Okay, so Photoshop actually has extra blending modes. Blending modes are a big part of this program. So let's take that newspaper down from normal to multiply. Okay, so now you can see that the newspaper is sort of multiplying over the donut, and we're creating more of that collage effect. Okay, so let's go ahead and make that even a little smaller. Okay, so now you can see we're starting to get sort of this collage-y thing that's happening. We can do the same with the donut itself. So if I select the donut and go to multiply, okay, now the donut is sort of like multiplying into the ocean scene. Okay, so that's a really interesting look, and we're starting to get some cool stuff that's happening here. You can also play around with opacity as well. Okay, so let's say I had this kind of over here, but I didn't like how dark it was sort of making everything. You can always go to the opacity slider and sort of turn that opacity down to whatever I want. And a shortcut for that is to use the numbers 1 through 0. Okay, so if I hit 5, it's going to go to 50% opacity. If I hit 2, it's going to go to 20% opacity. If I hit 0, it's going to go back to 100% opacity. Okay, so those are just a few of the tools that you have available to you. You can also add in a solid color. Okay, so if for some reason you didn't want the background to be white, A really simple way to change that is to add a new layer that's going to create a solid color. So if you go ahead and click on adjustment layer and then go to the top where it says solid color. Okay, we can pick some other kind of color. Let's say we want to work on more of like a pink type of surface. Okay, and if I turn off, right now you can't see it because the image is covering that up, but you can see that there's actually a pink layer under this. Okay, and if I, turned the photo to multiply as well, okay, now you can see that everything is sort of multiplying over this pink layer. You can also always play with text as well, and the text tool in Photoshop works pretty much exactly how you'd expect. Okay, so if I go ahead and click on the type tool, drag out an area, I can select whatever font I want. Let's go ahead and use Druck in this case. Okay, so I'm going to use this version of Druck, and I have white selected here. Okay, so if I type in something, like maybe I'll type in beach. Okay, let's go ahead and make that font a little bit larger. There we go. And right now, it's hard to see the type because it's actually underneath all these layers that are multiplying on top of it. So let's go ahead and drag that layer back to the top. Okay, and if you ever want to edit your type, which I do because this is too tight, the letter spacing is, everything's running into each other. What you can do is just double click on the little T icon here. Okay, and that'll put you back into that editing mode. And in the properties section, you can always, edit this to whatever you want. Okay, so if I wanted to go to a different weight, for instance, okay, maybe I wanted to do Druck medium instead, or change the tracking, I can do that. Okay, so that's another thing you can do in your collage. So really curious to see what you guys come up with. There's definitely a lot of creative things you can do. Sometimes the most interesting things will come from, some sort of conceptual twist. So if you find two things that are kind of similar in size or shape, for instance, these umbrellas kind of have a round shape and the donut has a round shape. Maybe what I could do is, replace the umbrellas with donuts. That could be something that is, a really little creative twist on, this scene. So looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Definitely have fun with this and make sure you're playing around with a combination of layer masks and all the different selection tools so that you get an idea of everything that you can do with selections.